Hello and welcome to the Ringer WNBA show. Opening weekend. We have Alexa Philippou of ESPN here to cover all of it with me. I am so excited. I'm very happy to have you on the show. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Thrilled to talk about some basketball. There was so much that happened this weekend, and it was really exciting to finally see everything that we were talking about and envisioning potentially happening from the offseason, especially after so much player movement in the free agency and in the offseason in general.
One place that I'd like to start, on the basketball side of the Fever versus Sky game, I covered all the other stuff earlier. The basketball aspect of it, from the Fever side, I think just their defense was what stood out to me. They held Chicago to 29% shooting, which we don't know what that means yet. But 58 points, which they held Chicago to, was the lowest scoring output of the weekend. Phoenix also held Seattle to 59, so it was definitely close. But, this is the reason, to your point of free agency additions, coaching additions. Stephanie White is here for a reason. DeWanna Bonner is here for a reason. Tasha Howard is here for a reason. And there was just so much I liked about what I saw on the defensive end, whether it was, DeWanna Bonner guarding guards, which we've seen her do. We saw her do it to Caitlin Clark in the playoffs. She was doing it to the Sky. She was guarding Sloot at different points, guarding Kia Nurse, Ariel Atkins, and that just allowed Natasha Howard and her to switch basically every pick and roll action. I don't think Chicago was prepared for it because it kind of, in my opinion, kind of blew up their offensive game plan. And I think it's great tape for them to get to look at after the first game of the season. Then DeWanna Bonner just being able to, she's just so damn versatile. Also, shout out to her. Yes. Is now third all time in scoring, past Tina Thompson. Could potentially end up being second. I don't think anyone's coming for DT anytime soon, but she could definitely end up being second. I think it was just a really cool thing for her to be able to do that in her Fever debut in the way that, the Fever kind of set her up for it. We saw the tape of Caitlin Clark basically saying, hey, we got to get you a play here. So shout out to her on that, but also just a game that she had subtly, not a big scoring game for her, but also on those switches, guarding Angel Reese, poking the ball away from her. I think that was her first Indiana Fever bucket as well. And I think that's a really difficult matchup for most teams, to have Angel on that switch or even to guard her as a four because of how quick she is. But DeWanna Bonner is just one of those few players who has the combination of length, speed, IQ, anticipation, where she can do both. She can guard the guard and she can guard somebody like Angel. And I just think seeing her impact right away and just seeing this Fever defense on a day where you see everything they're capable of on offense, but they were still kind of figuring their way into a couple of things. It just didn't really matter. They still put up over 90 points, which they will do when they get stops like that. But just really, really impressive start for them on that end, which I think is as far as their championship hopes go, I think the most important thing to look at.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And that's something I spent a few days at training camp with the Fever in the preseason. And, we heard that consistently brought up is that the defensive area was where they knew they had to grow the most. Obviously, bringing in Stephanie White, like you said earlier, was a big part of that. And then also, I think when we were talking during the offseason about Natasha Howard and DeWanna Bonner and what those acquisitions would mean, we talked a lot about the championship experience. We talked about what it would mean offensively and them being targets for Caitlin Clark. But to your point, we didn't really necessarily talk as much about, the impact that those two could have defensively, just their versatility, their experience at that end of the floor and the way that they could automatically elevate this unit from, I don't know where they ended this season. Was it, they were in the bottom of, defensive rating last year, even though, they eventually did, take off towards the second half.
Their defense was still pretty bad though, even through that stretch. Yeah.
Right.
Their offense figured things out.
Yeah, no, but what you were saying about their kind of ceiling as a team, it's going to rely a lot on that end of the floor. And I always think it's a good sign too, when you see things going really well, on defense, you think that's the sort of thing that'll also get better the more experience and time that those new pieces have with each other to build that chemistry and that synergy, that communication. So I thought it was a pretty good sign that they looked pretty good on that end when it's, game one and they still have 43 regular season games to go.
Yeah, absolutely. To have that level of synergy too. And I think there's probably some level of the fact that DeWanna Bonner is somebody who is coming from Steph White's Connecticut Sun team. And I think Natasha Howard too is somebody who is just really, really well suited to play defense in the way that Steph White wants. I think that Steph White just being such a great in-game adjuster, such a great tactician, somebody who really thinks creatively. Right. In her player skill sets, there are a lot of really interesting tools to allow her to try a whole bunch of different stuff. Like, I'm really, really curious for how things go against the Liberty. I think that will be like they're playing the Atlanta Dream, but that game will be done by the time this podcast comes out. The Liberty are going to be a fascinating test for them. I also want to, like, before we move on, shout out to Aaliyah Boston too.
Yes.
Who just completely, like, I think she just worked Cardoso all night, you know, and like maybe some fouls there, but also on that, you know, front of things as well. Like, this Fever team is just a lot more physical. You know, you can even take it back to Caitlin's take foul. I don't think she's taken that take foul a year ago. You know what I mean? Like, she probably doesn't even have the strength to do it. She doesn't have the stamina to be playing both ends, especially coming off that college season. I thought just her, you know, having 6 stocks at the same time, like, really being involved in help defense was huge as well. But Aaliyah also, like, she might have, there were definitely some times where she was fouling the crap out of Cardoso, but like, that's an allowance that really physical defenses get when you get to that level of play where you just get used to it. Like, teams know coming in. Like, I think that's what Chicago wants ultimately. They want to be a team that you don't want to play against. And I think we're seeing that out of the Indiana Fever, especially the size of that front court. Like, you are not going to want to go up against that. But I do think, that Liberty game is going to be really, really fascinating, because that's a team that we saw them, like, you were at their opening night game. So I'm really curious what you took away from it, but, or their opening afternoon game rather. But just, I mean, they just look like well-oiled machine. Like, they're slipping, they're passing, just the multifaceted scoring attack that they have, Natasha Howard's debut. I mean, they do have a reasonable amount of continuity, right? Like, especially when you compare it to the rest of the league with the amount of moves that they made. Like, Minnesota is the only team that's bringing back their entire starting lineup, but the Liberty are pretty close, like, with just replacing one player. So I think, like, you definitely saw that. Yeah,
no, I was most surprised by how smoothly, and it felt like pretty automatic, the Natasha Cloud assimilation essentially went. I mean, the way that she just wreaked havoc defensively, then offensively, 22 and 9, I think was her final stat line. Yeah. The plays that she made in the fourth quarter, it was like the back-to-back and ones on Chelsea Gray both times. Those were just completely momentum. That was like essentially when the game was over. Those were momentum shifting plays. But her ability to get to the rim and then spray the ball out, obviously the Liberty love to shoot their threes, so they can get plenty of looks that way. But I was just like, wow, this is what they were hoping for. This is what Jonathan Colby, he said that this was a player they had their eyes on for years, even before, obviously they didn't think they were necessarily going to get her this offseason, because it was a little bit of a surprise that she got traded from Phoenix, but it worked out incredibly well so far. Obviously, one game, again, small sample size, but you can see automatically the impact that she's going to make. And being around the Liberty a little bit more this preseason too, like, they've all talked about her voice and just her leadership, and her leadership by example is something that Natasha talked about after the game, of like being able to go and get those big buckets. And I think she's going to make a huge difference, especially with the loss of a player like, Benijah Laney Hamilton, even like Kayla Thornton. Like, those are 2 players that contributed a lot to the Liberty culture, to that grittiness and toughness. And I was a little worried before the season that those would be losses that the Liberty would feel, and that at some point would rear its head. But it seems pretty clear to me that Natasha Cloud's able to come in and at least make up for a lot of that, even if she hasn't been on the team for that long.
There were moments where she was guarding Asia Wilson last year, and there was a couple moments in this game where she was guarding Asia Wilson as well. How was ring night though? Like, any big takeaways?
Oh, the vibes are great. Mm-hmm. It was funny because I talked with Becky Hammond before the game, and she was saying how the Aces, from their perspective, were like, they kind of loved that it was going to be, the game that they were there, that it happened, and they were going to embrace it and all this stuff. And you could tell the Liberty was also a little bit, they knew that they want, Vegas was going to try and come out and give them their best shot. But, obviously the Aces weren't on the floor when the banner and the rings happened, but it was incredible. The crowd was great. It was so cool to see that banner and to hear also the players talk about that being the standard that's really set. Even for, I forget if it was, who said it? Was it Sabrina or maybe Stewie was talking about like, yeah, that's the standard for, anyone who comes into Barclays, whether it's us or the Nets. And I'm like laughing to myself. Or,
that's really kind.
Right.
Good teammate there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the rings I thought looked pretty cool. They're huge. I don't know if anyone hasn't seen it. Go look on Brianna Swart's Instagram. You can see her ring collection on her grandma's hand, and also like all the Olympic medals and stuff.
That was really cute. So, I will say they kind of look like a universal charger to me. You know what I mean?
I did not think of that, but yeah, now I can see what you're talking about.
I saw it. I couldn't unsee it. I'm sorry for anybody else who can't unsee it from here on out. I did think they were cool rings, but that definitely stood out to me.
I like the earrings, like how the earrings were kind of included with the crown. So it's like, no one's going to wear the ring, like, that frequently. But then, in terms of the vibes, like once the whole, all the ceremony and all that was done, then it was like the basketball and the Liberty pretty much, I mean, there were stretches where the Aces looked better and, they tried to make it closer, but the Liberty pretty much had that game under control, like from the first half. So I thought it was a really great all around day for New York Liberty basketball. The Aces, I don't know if we'll talk about that in the next segment in terms of things that we didn't like, but
yeah, I mean, good time to be a New York basketball fan. Absolutely. Yeah. I think what you said about Becky actually kind of gets one of the things that I don't like, and is kind of my issue with the Aces this year, which is I feel like they believe that their issues last year were a lot more psychological than they were systemic and scheme oriented. And I think their problems are actually a lot more personnel and scheme oriented. There was nothing I saw in this game that convinced me that they were any more suited to be able to handle what the Liberty can throw at you. And I just want to so shout out to Nikias Duncan, who actually asked this question after the game. He asked about how he felt about the Aces switching to Becky. And Becky basically said, well, we can't be allowing slips. You have to stay, you can't let them get behind you, basically. And, that it's just a matter of execution and effort, and you have to, I'm paraphrasing, and she said, you kind of have to just trust the system. I don't believe in the system. I just don't believe in the system anymore. Like, at least when it comes to stuff like that, because you are asking, I get what she's saying as far as effort goes, but you are asking older players who are undersized to consistently make that kind of effort in a regular season game and then potentially in a 5-game playoff series.
Or 7.
Personally, this version of the Aces, I feel like they're a second round out. They might be one of the best second round outs we've ever seen, with a player like Asia Wilson, who put up 31, 16, and 3 assists, but everyone else shot 28%. I'll get to the offensive end of how I feel about this in a second, but I feel like the defensive coverages, New York got 60% of their points in the paint, and a lot of it was off of those switches. So let's say you do everything Becky's asking you to do. Breanna Stewart over the top is still going to shoot over Jewel Lloyd. We saw that and one that just felt straight up disrespectful. It looked like, when a dad is dunking on their kid or something like that. It wasn't a fair fight. And I don't think that's really the player's fault. There's only so much that guards can do against the size of a team like the Liberty. And I think that they're going to have to deal with these problems with other teams too. Obviously, the Liberty are a bad matchup for them, but we just watched the Phoenix Mercury do that to the Seattle Storm in their opening night win. We just talked about Indiana's front court as well. There's so much more depth, versatility, and size and skill at those front court positions that I just think that there are a lot of teams that are going to be able to take advantage of them if that's going to be what they're doing on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think you're spot on when you talked about Becky thinking the problems were more psychological, because I and in my conversation with her the other day, she brought that up again, and basically that, it was more so people weren't, grasping the small details, and, it was a mental thing, and that things were off from the beginning, right? She said that, I'm sure you've heard that, she could tell. And then, she said this year she doesn't have that same feeling, that she's feeling, she doesn't know how good they'll be, but she thinks they'll be very good. But what Saturday showed me was that, again, small sample size, avoiding hot takes, in my personal thing, but I just don't know if and I know they were also missing, they didn't have Cheyenne Parker-Tyus, who they won't have for the foreseeable future until she comes back from giving birth to her second child. They were down a few other players too, so it wasn't their, this is what their bench will ideally look like. But I'm still not sure if they made the moves in the offseason that they needed to properly respond to the issues that the Liberty have posed to them, really dating back to the 2024 season, because they're now 1-7 against the Liberty, I think, since the beginning of 2024. And I just don't think that's, again, they have a completely different look from their bench. I don't think they haven't improved in terms of that size component to really respond on the defensive end. I just don't see anything to make me believe that that's really gonna improve at this point.
Yeah.
But Jackie Young eventually that's more offensively, I guess. So I'll hold that for later. But there were some stretches where you saw them like putting it together more. Jewell Loyd was basically uninvolved for very large swaths of the game. So that was an issue. But again, the defense is, I think, like at the heart of it. It's not just, if they got Jewell involved more, if Jackie was making more shots early on. So I have similar concerns as you do.
I do think that maximizing their guard play offensively is probably their best route into becoming a championship level team again, because I think that's one of the clear advantages they have over other teams. And if they are going to be outsized, maybe they can, just punish you on the other end with elite guard play. And then obviously you have Asia. And if she doesn't have to do everything on the offensive end, maybe she can find ways to bolster your defense. But that's another part where I just like, I felt like this is like an aspect of it where I definitely don't want to go like too hot takey on it. But I did think like offensively as well, like Jewell Loyd, 2 for 10, but trying to find a way to integrate her into the system as opposed to finding ways to tweak your system to, better suit what she's really good at. Like she was 0 for 4 from like the corner-ish threes. Yeah. That's not a place that she really shoots from a lot. Like that's just not really her shot. And it felt like she was like kind of a spot up shooter. And that's an aspect of the Aces offense that's like really vital to them. They took more corner threes than any team in the W last season, but they lost a lot of those shooters. Like they lost Plum and Alicia Clark, and even Tiffany Hayes was like a pretty big part of that too. And Tiffany Mitchell is not really a corner three shooter, neither is Dana Evans, and neither is Jewell Loyd. And it feels like right now like they're just trying to fit into an older version of what the Aces do. Where I just do think that they kind of need to evolve what they do on the offensive end, whether that's like getting Jewell more pin downs, getting her more space in the mid-range area, running more pick and rolls for her. And that is so much more solvable. Like that to me is like, I think that will come. But yeah, like, and I think that's like kind of their pathway.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a good sign that like Chelsea Gray, we know that she's in a better spot health-wise than she was even at the end of last year. So I think and Jackie Young is, usually not going to have like the sort of first half she did, for large swaths of the game. Like she's usually more productive and efficient than that. So I do feel like, they have the ability to get, really great production from their guards. And like you said, if they can tweak their system to fit what Jewell's really good at in a little bit, more intentionally, then that could really benefit them. But yeah, I don't know. I actually was in the Liberties press conference and not the Aces because they were happening simultaneously. But I was told that the vibe wasn't too doom and gloom from
it was
Becky.
It was pretty solution oriented, even from Asia as well. Like I don't think it was like, oh no, we're screwed or like anything like that. It was just I think it was fine. I mean, I think it's the first game. This is obviously a team that's won 2 championships. I don't think they're going to freak out. I think they're going to go back to the drawing board. It's just like some of those problems they can solve, and I think some of those are just issues that you either have to overcome by being so good on one end of the floor, or they're gonna lose. Like that's just it's one or two to me. What's up with Dallas, man? Like, what are you thinking? I also really like. I would love to get your perspective on Paige's first few days in Dallas, at like first few games in Dallas. As somebody who has like written extensively and really written like really great features about her as a human being, and about like how she approaches the game, and to some degree about her mental health. That's not something I'm trying to get into, but I just think like you are somebody who understands like the psychology of Paige and the type of leader she wants to be. And she's entering this Dallas team where she passes the ball, she likes to be unselfish, she might not necessarily get it back, and is somebody who definitely has said she wants to lead, but is not really like somebody who I don't think her natural leadership style is to like impose her will. And she's entering this Dallas team where I think some fans are maybe wishing that she might. I don't know if I really feel like she should like change the way she approaches things, but I'm just kind of curious what you think.
Yeah, well, and I think also, I mean, I know you can speak to this. You wrote a great piece on Paige too. Was it after the championship game or around the championship game, and about like the whole idea of not having to change who she is and whether or not she's being assertive enough or aggressive enough. So I thought, actually, I'm glad we're recording this now, because I thought she looked, obviously yesterday was a much more productive, game for her. I forget how many points she had, if it was like 17 or 19. 17, and then 8 assists. She looked more comfortable, more assertive. They also
the only wing starter with a positive plus minus as well.
Oh yeah, and Enrique was like minus 16, and Dejanay was minus 17. And I was gonna say they really had a good stretch with that line. Ty Harris had some really great minutes. Maddie Siegrist. Tiara McCowan played better than the first game. So you can see like Dallas is trying to figure out its rotations, its lineups, who works best together, all of that. So I think that's part of maybe what we're seeing, like the Wings go through. But when it comes to Paige specifically, I actually want to credit Sue Bird for this talking point. But Sue, I saw a clip of her talking about how Paige is the sort of player that tends to like to let the game come to her and like feel things out. And then she kind of, once she has that moment, she then really puts it together and you see her kind of taking things by the horns. And I got a little bit of a sense of that. I thought even in the preseason, you saw that was happening. I don't think there's
preseason debut, you definitely felt that.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it speaks to maybe what you're kind of alluding to about, fans want her to just go up and put 20-point games up from the get-go. I just don't know if that's in her nature. I do think it's a very interesting spot she's in Dallas because it's a younger team. She is their franchise player now, as their number one pick, and I do feel like everyone's talked about her as a leader on that team, and I'm very curious whether or not, and I think she probably would take pride in that, but a leader sometimes is also like going up and taking the most shots in a game or calling your shot when you need to, not just kind of deferring. So that's been something we've talked about a ton with her at UConn. But deferring to, it's just going to be different for her to kind of work that out in this sort of, in a Dallas team that's rebuilding that only has 3 returners from last year. They're trying to get to know her. And also there's high expectations for her. And I'm sure she also wants to have, a good season. It's not like she just wants to totally sit idly by and let her rookie season go by, and not do anything impactful.
I mean, I would say even just from the progress that I saw from game 1 to game 2, it definitely gives me a level of faith in I think Paige is going to have an incredible rookie year. I think we're having we'll talk about the Mystics. I think she's running away with rookie of the year. I just think she is. I think she's a fantastic player. She already figured out so much between game 1 to game 2. She got to her spots a lot better. She got a lot more touches. I think the offense sort of reconfigured itself on the fly. And I have to give a shout out to Chris Kalanis on that end too. I do think that I was wondering, we've seen so much positivity out of him. And I feel like after that first game and Tiara McCown, leaving the huddle early and all of that, I did have this thought of okay, you have this coach who is trying to set this foundation of their biggest thing is that they've said is we want players to exit the season and feel like they enjoyed their experience. They're just really trying to reset their culture in Dallas. And in my mind, I was like, okay, but is this also gonna be the guy who puts a hammer down at the same time? Right. And he said it after that first game, hey, players aren't always going to be happy with their minutes, and that's just my job. And then we saw in this game, Maddie Siegrist, who I think should eventually be a starter on this team. I think she's definitely been one of their best players on both ends on the front court. She got a ton of minutes in this game. Ty Harris, who I think plays really well alongside Paige, got a lot of minutes in this game. Melissa Smith did not. Dejanay Carrington did not. And then you have to figure out the Enrique aspect of it. I think that's the biggest immediate question is sort of how well will those two players fit together. Enrique has been very excited for Paige to be here, right? I think it just might be a tactical fit. They might have to figure out. And it kind of, I don't want to, I think the Caitlin Paige comparison is a little bit too much sometimes, but it does remind me a little bit of early Kelsey Mitchell, where it's she's trying to find her offense, Clark is trying to find her offense, and they look like two kind of different entities, but through the course of the season, right. they meshed, and then the yin and yang just started to work real well together. I do think that we could eventually see that from Enrique, who, by the way, it's not like she's just shooting the leather out of the ball. I think the perception is that it is that, and I just don't think that she's taken an inappropriate amount of shots by any means. She's taking way less than she did last year, which she should. That Dallas team was not good. But I'm willing to wait it out. I'm very much willing to wait it out with this team.
Yeah, no, I think, there's obviously a lot of reactions after yesterday because she was, I feel like she was put, I should have looked this back up, but yeah, she went back in towards the end of the fourth quarter, but there was a large swath of that second half where she wasn't in, and it was working for Dallas.
Definitely, yeah. I think you saw the ball movement in Paige ball.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I don't think we need to completely overreact to that one game, especially kind of what you just were alluding to. But Tierra McCowan essentially didn't play and then came back the second game and was better. So I'm very interested to see how Chris handles all of those kind of components of fitting the pieces together. And then also Arike and Paige, like I think it's a great sign that, Arike I know we always talked about like how excited she was from the draft lottery about getting the number one pick. So we know that, this is something that it seems like she really believes in, the fact that they can have a good partnership together, but working on the tactics of how that, will transpire and how they can get the best out of each other when they're on the floor. And I just think that's the biggest thing that we haven't seen is like they haven't completely like had that synergy yet. But I also am not shocked because it's been, a few weeks that they've been working together. So once, and it's Paige getting comfortable in her own sense on the floor, and then it's about the two of them getting comfortable with each other, and they do have different playing styles, and that just takes time to mesh. So I think if we have these concerns in like July or August, then that's a different conversation.
Definitely.